I'll resume reading this. We have a lot to read. So we go. As we've seen, passion covers a lot of ground, from the literal torture and death of Jesus to romantic feelings to intense interests such as love of photography. Pursuing your passion can mean getting paid to do what you're interested in, but it also can simply mean investing time, devoting resources, and making sacrifices for something or someone you love. Yet today the expression pursue your passion is often interpreted or assumed to mean get paid to do what you love. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong and much that can be blessed and right about getting paid to do what you love to do. I'm grateful to be lucky enough to experience that very thing for much of my life. On the other hand, we will be required to do many things over the course of our lives, most of which we aren't in fact passionate about, and many things we are but don't get paid for. It's important to parse out the various meanings and assumptions of these words and phrases because they can easily get funneled into narrow applications that distort our understanding and our expectations. I've had countless people tell me that hearing this message, pursue your passion, has made them feel like a failure for not being passionate about their jobs. Some have even said that they heard this advice so often that they've never stopped to think about the fact that many, if not most, people aren't passionate about what they do for a living. That it's just a living. Notice that it's called a living, not living. There's a difference. It gets worse. Some people I know have been told that if they aren't pursuing their passion in their employment, they are not doing God's will. Oh, jeez Louise. Now, it certainly is true that we must steward our passions and our opportunities to pursue those passions. Being born in a time and place in which that is possible is a gift, is itself a gift of God's sovereign will that must be stewarded well. But imagine the vast majority of workers and providers across the planet toiling day in and day out to eke out a living for themselves and for those dependent on them. Imagine telling them they're out of God's will because they aren't passionate about their paid work. The sports world is one place where we can be reminded of the goodness of being an amateur, someone who participates for the love of the game without being a paid professional. Read this and that was fine. Many sports associations maintain rigid rules that divide the amateur from the professional. From ancient times into the 20th century, the Olympic Games, for example, were strictly for amateurs. No professionals allowed. But that changed over the past several decades for a number of reasons. Perhaps the greatest factor was televising the games. Professional players simply attract more viewers. These rules can be muddied by financial interests and politics. The long-standing distinction between amateur and professional is helpful to keep in mind. At the distinction's core is the acknowledgement that some great passions can be pursued out of sheer love. Indeed, the word amateur comes from a French word that means love. In fact, 96% of the passions identified by people in one study had no relation to their work but were instead connected to hobbies and other interests. By no means is anyone a failure or sinful merely because their day job is not their passion. My friend Mindy Lawrence is a great lover of art, literature, and dance. She has spent the past couple of decades raising 4 children and helping out their homeschool cooperative. In that role, Mindy has written, adapted, and produced plays for students to perform at the end of each school year. Mindy doesn't get paid to do this. It's just something she contributes to the education of her children and the other members of their educational community. But there's the amazing thing. Among all the people I know who love performing arts, I don't know many, if any, who've had the opportunity to write and produce as many plays as Mindy has. She has been able to pursue her passion as a playwright and producer for the stage to an extent that only others can dream of. Doing this has also led to opportunities for Mindy to co-write and produce original works for a local dance studio. Yet it is only recently that Mindy came to see this work, which she does out of passion, as a true calling. And it is. For the most part, as for most of us, merely having a desire or a passion inside us does not necessarily mean we will receive a call from outside that will fulfill that passion. Some people have a passion for the Lord of the Rings. Actually, a lot of people do. But only a 0.00001% of people with that passion are going to get a call to be part of making a film or filling a role related to the series. And yet anyone can talk about it, tweet about it, join book clubs about it, and critique the film adaptations till the sun goes down. That's a passion, not a vocation. As another example, I have a passion for running. I run almost every day and have done so for most of my life, ever since I failed to make the cheerleading team in junior high and joined the cross-country team instead. They'll let anyone join cross-country, but no one, and I mean no one. is calling me to run for them. If you've seen me run, that would be obvious, although I actually did pretty well on my team by my junior year of high school. My purpose in running these days isn't to win a race or even train for one. My passion to run is how I fulfill my need to live a balanced life, taking a break from the sedentary indoor life of writing and reading to get outside and move my body while my brain rests. We used to call these things we love to do for fun, things like Tolkien, fan culture, or running, hobbies. That's a quaint word you don't very often hear anymore. A more technical word, one we also don't hear anymore, is avocation. Avocation, like the A is right next to vocation. While vocation describes one's work or job, avocation just denotes that one pursues what one pursues outside of work simply out of love, out of passion. Originally, avocation meant a move away from one's calling or work. Notice the assumption built into these categories is that what one does for money is not necessarily or even likely to be something one loves to do. The fact is that being paid to do what you love has, for the most of human history, been the exception, not the rule. Coffee Lovers offer a simple illustration of how a passion can play out. Some people are passionate about roasting, brewing, and serving excellent coffee and have turned that passion into paid work. Some people are passionate about drinking coffee and will develop all sorts of knowledge and nuance about how they prefer it, which no one pays them to share or indulge in. Someone passionate about coffee, as I was from the age of 22 until about now, might experience that passion changing, even unwillingly, as they reach a certain age in which they can stomach half a cup of their beloved black coffee each day and no more. The point is that passions, even for the same thing, can take a different form for everyone, and those forms and the passions themselves can change over the course of our lives too. And by the way, a taste for coffee is, for most people, cultivated rather than natural, pointing again to how passions can owe more to nurture than nature. I met someone recently who loves to bake. She's an excellent at it. She loves especially to bake cakes and cupcakes that she can give to neighbors and those in need. Her friends have urged her to turn her baking into a business, and they cannot understand why she would not. Why wouldn't she? Because baking is something for her something she does for sheer love, for relaxation, and for the quiet time it offers her to think, reflect, pray, and commune with God. Not everything we do must be turned into money. Even Paul and Jesus had day jobs. Consider the legendary story of Steve Jobs, dropping out of college, starting a computer business in his garage, and founding Apple, the company that changed the world and all our lives. There's one crucial part of this story that I've never encountered until reading Cal Newport's So Good They Can't Ignore You. Newport explains that Jobs' initial passion had nothing to do with computing business or entrepreneurialism. Before stumbling into that part of his life, Jobs spent years on a spiritual quest that took him to India, a Zen training center, and a life on commune. That was the passion he first pursued. What he ended up doing with passion and excellence could hardly be, at least on the surface, more opposite. This one example, and multiplied many times in other stories, is why Newport believes that the myth of pursuing your passion not only fails to describe how most people actually end up with compelling careers, but for many people it can actually make things worse, leading to chronic job shifting and unrelenting angst when one's reality inevitably falls short of the dream. Newport's research shows, he argues, that it's hard to predict in advance what you'll eventually grow to love. My friend Julie Ann Smith has seen this firsthand. After marriage ended when she was in her 50s, she needed to find a way to support herself and her children. Her research showed that her cybersecurity was a field in high demand and one in which professionals don't tend to age out. Julie knew nothing about cybersecurity when she began her studies in the field. She actually hated computers and didn't even know how to move the cursor from one monitor to the next. Now, years later, she has grown to love her work as a cybersecurity analyst and finds deep satisfaction in work she knows is relevant and meaningful. And she's good at it. This idea that you should pursue your passion, what Newport calls the passion hypothesis, is treated today as a standard formula, but according to Newport, it's not likely to work in the long run. Newport says it is unfortunate that this candid convinces people that somewhere there's a magic right job waiting for them, and if they find it, they'll immediately recognize that this is the work they were meant to do. The problem, of course, is when they fail to find this certainty, bad things follow, such as chronic job hopping and crippling self-doubt. Understanding that there's no magic formula or perfect job just waiting for you can be freeing. Such an understanding encourages you to pursue different interests, develop different skills, and accumulate a range of experiences, and see them all as an ongoing part of pursuing your calling, knowing that God will use it all. I love the way Samantha Klassen describes this process, comparing the finding of our vocation to the imperfect and sometimes frustrating process of weaving threads on a loom. Klassen says that in looking back on our life, we can often see the way our experiences crossed over each other to become part of the whole, like a tapestry or woven cloth. We see how our vocation is composed of even the threads that, at the time, felt like a complete mistake or a shot in the dark. I've always advised college students to major in what interests them at this stage in their life, simply because they can, but I also tell them and their parents that the majority of college students will change their major. Indeed, the structure of a liberal arts degree is designed to require foundational studies in a variety of subjects that support the second half of the degree, which is focused on a particular discipline. This approach is based on the exception that being exposed to a range of subjects may lead to the discovery of new interests and abilities, as well as the fact that general knowledge supports particular fields of knowledge. Thus, the core classes required for the degree are not merely the ones you have to take, that you will never use, as students sometimes complain. Interests may change over time, but most of us are more likely to learn while studying something of interest. So my advice for college students is to major in what you love while you have the chance. My corresponding advice to concerned parents is that it's not necessarily practical to be practical. Most four-year degrees are essentially equal, so the chance to pursue an interest within that context ought not to be squandered. Within the narrow context and short time frame of gaining a four-year degree, pursuing your passion is exactly the right advice, especially in an age in which a college degree has become what a high school diploma was for past generations. At the same time, a lifetime of financial debt is not worth 4 years of passion, a lesson that has come too late for many young people and those who advise them poorly. There really is no golden ticket to material success, but wise stewardship of all we have been given will always bear good fruit. As with a taste for coffee, passions are more likely to be developed over time with experience than to be pre-existing. As Newport argues, our identity, our loves, and our passions are complicated, and not reducible to black and white or yes or no answers. So making job, career, and even vocational decisions based on those questions that require yes or no answers alone is not always wise. Our desires are always being formed and cultivated, not only by our innate qualities, but also by outer sources. Those outer sources include God, who creates all of us as unique beings, and our parents, as in the story by Blackaby, along with our friends, peers, society, social media, art, culture, and ads. So many ads. Are you as easily spurred by a television commercial to crave chicken wings as I am? Do you eventually break down and buy the shoes that keep appearing on websites after you look them up just one time? So much of what we desire is cultivated by our surrounding culture. I recall vividly the first time I heard a young person whose goal was to become a famous YouTuber. I was truly incredulous. Who has ever heard of such a thing? Although now I understand it a little bit more. Similarly, I remember being interviewed by a student publication about 10 years ago. The student who interviewed me asked how someone who could become an influencer. I thought I literally was being asked how one can have influence on people. I went on and on about building relationships with the people around you, having meaningful conversations, and showing that you listen and care. I was surprised that a young adult didn't know how people have influence on each other. It was sometime later when I was introduced to the concept of the influencer, and I remembered back to that conversation. Recently, my yoga instructor, who trained in India for a religious form of yoga practice that lasts hours each day and is extremely skilled in the practice, observed how she'd been even better at her practice if she'd started when she was 5 rather than when she was middle-aged. But no one was doing yoga in rural Virginia in the 1960s, she noted wryly. The point is that our desires, as well as our passions, are much more externally formed than we might realize. Think about the passions people have today that wouldn't even have been possible a century ago, or even decades ago, the ones rooted in the newest trends in technology, such as YouTubing and influencing. But history goes back much further than 2010. Did men and women develop a passion to fly airplanes or become an astronaut 200 years ago? I don't think so. Meanwhile, the number of nuns in America has declined by 76% over the last 50 years. The vocation still exists, but something in society has happened to make fewer people want to pursue that particular calling. Our desires collectively are changing, and that's only natural as the world changes. The masterpiece of the world literature, Don Quixote, is, among other things, the sweet comic story of a man determined to fulfill his passion for knighthood and chivalry, despite the passing of that age. He enlists the assistance of a farm worker to serve as his squire, and the two sally forth on adventures that are rooted more in their wild imaginations than in reality, actions based on the past rather than the present. Like Quixote, we can all find ourselves tilting at windmills from time to time. Fulfilling our passions and finding our callings depends greatly on the context of our place and time. Some people feel a sense of having been born at the wrong time, simply because the way their souls have been formed would better fit another time. But alas, time travel is not an option. Each of us must find our place in the world where we are. In my case, my passion to read might be innate. It might be related to how I was wired, how my brain and personality work, how God knit me together in the womb. There is no way to know. But what I do know is that God in His providence had me born in a specific time and place, and to parents who could cultivate this passion within me. My mother regularly read to me from the start. My father did too sometimes. When I could finally read on my own, I never stopped reading. But many people in other times and places didn't read because they couldn't. Even if they could, they didn't have easy access to as many books as I have. When I think, for example, about Frederick Douglass determinedly learning to read as an enslaved child at a time in which it was unlawful as well as unsafe to teach a slave to read, I cannot imagine my own passion and skill to read coming even close to his. He read as though his life depended on it, because it did. Yet he could have lost his life for doing it. He eventually used these dearly bought skills to become an abolitionist, a reformer, and a preacher, hoping to change the course of history. Circumstances that bring or deny opportunity are at the core of the 10,000-hour rule. The idea that becoming excellent at something requires 10,000 hours of practice, a concept popularized by Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. One must exist in circumstances that make such practice possible. The simple truth is that many will not even have the opportunity to pursue their passions as intensely as they might wish, while still others will have untapped, unknown potential that their circumstances simply won't bring to the surface. Thomas Gray's. I might fall asleep while I'm doing this. Most famous poem, Elegy Written in a Country Courtyard, published in 1751, addresses this idea. The poem describes an evening scene in a place described in the poem's title, a rustic cemetery outside a rural church. The churchyard holds old gravestones of humble farmers, housewives, laborers, and children, all long laid to rest, those whose lives were spent in hard, anonymous toil, this hamlet's rude forefathers, until those lives ended, destined to remain forever unknown to the rest of the world. The poem describes the kind of work that likely filled the days of those buried there. For them no more the blazing hearth shall burn, or busy housewife play her evening care. No children run to lips their sire's return, or climb his knees the envied kiss to share. Oft did the harvest to sickle yield, their furrow oft the stubborn liberty has broke. How junkst did they drive their team afield, how bowed the woods beneath their sturdy stroke. These words give dignity to the labor and lives of those unknown villagers. The poem goes on to chide the ambitious, striving elite of the world who might scorn ordinary rustics like these. Let not ambition mock their useful toil, their homely joys, and destiny obscure, nor grandeur hear with a disdainful smile the short and simple annals of the poor. We arrive at the crucible of the whole poem when it suggests that there may be little essential difference between these anonymous souls and the great remembered names of history beyond their circumstances. Indeed, some who are buried here might also have accomplished what the great poets, warriors, and kings in history have done, if their circumstances had been different. Perhaps in this neglected spot is laid some heart once pregnant with celestial fire, hands that wrought of empire might have swayed, or waked to ecstasy the living lyre. But knowledge to their eyes her ample page, rich with spoils of time, dear near unroll, chill poetry repressed their noble rage, and froze the gentle curtain of the soul. Some village Hampden with that dauntless breast the little tyrant of his fields withstood. Some mute, inglorious Milton here may rest, some Cornwall guiltless of his country's blood. In other words, there may have been among the poor masses of people some who might have had the same innate passions and latent skills of the mighty people born to history, such as the great poet John Milton, or the Puritan leader Oliver Cornwell. But the lives of these country folk were born into, called to, left them to live and die in obscurity regardless of what natural untapped gifts they may have possessed, just as what will happen to most of us who live on this earth. As Os Gideonist explains, giftedness does not stand alone in helping us discern our callings. It lines up alongside other factors such as family heritage, our life opportunities, God's guidance, and our unquestioning readiness to do what He shows. This hard truth gets to the heart of what it means to be called. definitions. Have you ever noticed that the most important words seem to have the most meanings? This fact makes sense when you think about how the most meaningful human concepts have been around for a long time and have been considered and examined, explored, and contested for just as long. Concepts related to work and our vocational callings have, not surprisingly, occurred many terms that have various meanings and applications. The key to knowing how they are being used is context. Vocation and calling are words used in widely varying contexts, and their meanings can change within those contexts. For example, sometimes in this book I use vocation in contrast to a vocation. But my overall argument about vocation is that it transcends profession and play. A vocation can be fulfilled in a paid or unpaid position. Most of our vocations, in fact, aren't related to work or career at all. When I was being formed in my mother's womb, God called me to be a daughter to both of my parents and a sister to my 2 older brothers. Familial relationships are callings. Later as a child, the Lord called me to himself, and I became a Christian, the most important calling of all. Marriage, too, is a vocation, both as the Catholic Church and Martin Luther might have thought. Some have the calling, others do not. While the word calling has many different applications, the overall sense is the same. A vocation might begin as a hobby and then become a job or a career. It might even be something that we devote our whole lives to and never get paid to do or gain public recognition for doing. It can overlap with any of these other categories, but it will always transcends all. Work, which as we've seen is part of what it means to be human and imitate our Creator through the creative nature of work, can fall into various categories. We do work in many areas of our lives. In a short interview, Elizabeth Gilbert, author of Eat, Pray, Love, helpfully defines her 4 categories of work: hobby, the career, job, and divine. I'm writing on Gilbert to decide them briefly here before fleshing out the come of the chapters that follow. Hobby. Gilbert describes hobbies as the interests we pursue simply for pleasure. What makes a hobby fun, even if it requires a lot of effort, is that the stakes are zero. In pursuing a hobby, you don't have to make money for it, you don't have to attract an audience for it, and you don't have to make a name for yourself. A hobby may be can be completely for private enjoyment, like my very unskilled flower gardening. Job. Of the 4 categories, Gilbert says it is only one that is necessary. We need to have all the means put a roof over our heads and food on the table. Very few of us, as she points out, are landed gentry these days. Even the vast majority of writers and artists have day jobs. A job doesn't have to be great or fulfilling, she says. It just has to pay. And if a better one comes along, all the latter, the things you have in life can be pursued outside a job.